Happy New Year! I thought 2024 couldn't get any worse. And just in the dying embers, the club finally give us an olive branch heading into 2025 as Wayne Rooney is relieved of his duties at Home Park. The club statement reads, Plymouth Argyle and head coach Wayne Rooney mutually agreed to part ways with immediate effect. Departing the club with Rooney will be assistant head coach Mike Phelan and first team coach Simon Ireland. First team coach Kevin Nanscoville and club captain Joe Edwards will lead the team for our Sky Bet Championship match against Bristol City on New Year's Day. I can never say his name. Daryl Flahaven, that will do, will continue as goalkeeping coach. We would like to thank Wayne and his team for all their efforts and wish them well for their future. The club will be making no further comment at this stage, with updates on our new first team management staff in due course. Joining me tonight, we'll go clockwise as always. Graham. Joe, I didn't listen to the pod yesterday, but I know that Joe signed it off as our last pod of 2024, of which you were on.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're back. You're back for another one just before the year's out.
Temporary basis only until 6:30. Yep.
Yeah. Like Nance and Edwards, hopefully. Dan Ellard, you're back. How's things?
Indeed. Very good. Best I've been in 7 months, you could say.
Yeah, people may not have known that you took a hiatus from the pod. Pretty much from the day that we hired Wayne Rooney, you gave up, didn't you?
I would have just been moaning, constantly and constant negativity. And you've already got Sam Down and John Alsop for that. So why would you need me as well?
That's very true. And one team of Devon's, James Stables. How's things? Oh, I can't hear you. I think it helps. You're on mute. Let's take you off mute.
That's great.
There you go.
Celebrating all things renewal. Let's say that.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, James, whilst we're with you and whilst you're unmuted, do you want to just give us your initial thoughts on the departure?
Yeah, I mean, I've been addicted to social media for the last 40 hours because it felt something was brewing, few rumours, and I think we've got to be careful, I think, what we say, but information spitting out over non-playing matters, allegations and sort of hearsay was adding up to a situation that seemed untenable, even on top of the results over the last couple of months. And a lot of it seemed to explain quite a lot of what we were seeing in real time. And I just felt as soon as that started happening, that it changed the playing field. So a decision was coming. And as I say, I've been keeping my eye on social, just expecting to see some corner flag based imagery appearing from the club. And I was out for a run earlier and it dropped. And I don't think it perhaps surprised me it didn't happen yesterday or the day before, but not surprising that Simon Hallett's taken the decision he has. Also, the extent to which this decision is sorry to jump in. Club,
Sorry to jump in, Jane. I'm just going to take your camera off. If you just take your camera off, the Wi-Fi is not great. I think that might be fine. The audio. There's a little bit of.
Sorry, mate. I thought this might happen. We don't know to the extent to which the clearing of house is going to take, and that could be ongoing. More rumours flying around that it may not be stopping at the coaching staff. But yeah, not surprising that Simon Hallett took this decision, and perhaps the only surprising fact is that it took that long.
Yeah, absolutely. Graham, going back to yesterday's pod, already mentioned it once, going to mention it again. You said that you were waiting for some news, just any news, and this was just all too inevitable, wasn't it?
It was. I mean, there was total radio silence yesterday, which pointed to one or two things. and now in retrospect, it pointed to the mutual consent departure, which absolutely is the right decision. And I must say, I thought Wayne's comments were very gracious, and it was never about him as a person. He was well liked and by players, staff, and fans. But clearly, the football side of it, certainly we thought Mick Phelan might have made a difference. He did for a couple of games, but Coventry and Oxford was so dire. And I did recommend yesterday for people to watch Aaron Cusack's analysis of what went wrong at Oxford. And it was so fundamental, it was so much the basics weren't being done, it just couldn't continue. Football-wise, it couldn't continue. Now, I was a big advocate. I sensed that Wayne was shouldering the burden very much on his own. There wasn't Neil Dewsnip, Mike Phelan, nowhere to be seen, no support from Andrew Parkinson or even Simon Hallett. And it was taking its toll. And I'm much relieved that he's gone, and he's gone with good grace. And I wish him all the best when he appears on Sky in the next week or so. So, as a pundit, that is. But I sense, all right, it's temporary. Nance and Joe are the obvious choices to reunite the fan base, get the One Argyle back on track, which is something that's been sadly lacking in recent times, and have been lacking over the last week when we perhaps most needed it. The clarion call of support just wasn't there. So what's happened is inevitable, and has been alluded to. There's strong rumours that Neil Dewsnip has departed as well, but have to caution that it's not been officially confirmed by the club. But if you were avid viewer, reader of Passotti, it's all over that, and the source from where that information has come from is as good as you're going to get on such a website. So we'll see. And I'd like to pay my respect if it is true. And I know Neil Dewsnip has got some brickbats for his part in the appointments, etc., etc. We shouldn't forget the contribution he's made to getting our academy up and running, the players that are coming through, and getting Falston Park / Brickfields implemented, and will make a major contribution to the club over the next decades. So he should be thanked for that, with all gratitude from Argyle fans.
Dan, you've already been compared to Dean Smalley and who else?
Nick Chadwick. Thanks, guys.
Nick Chadwick and Ryan Taylor.
Oh, and now Ryan Taylor. Well, I was about to say any chance that you could compare me to a good centre forward, but then Ryan Taylor, that works. I'll go with that.
And there's a Lewis Rooney shouting there as well, which is obviously topical. His namesake losing his job. I think you told us so, didn't you, Dad? How badly this was going to go?
I think the main thing when he got appointed was, and then in the kind of weeks that followed, the pre-season kind of optimism, the wave of optimism that spread through our fan base, and all I'd really kind of seen that he'd seemed to do was do a kind of few basic kind of media training level 1 type quotes about how much he loves the club and all this stuff, and then he made a few amusing appearances in the local pubs and that type of thing. And that seemed to be all it took. We just kind of decided to forget that his record at Derby and DC United and Birmingham was terrible. I fully appreciate that in the position that we're in, we might have to go out when appointing a manager or a head coach, take someone that has a bit of a mixed managerial record, someone with some failures and success on their CV. But what baffled me was this guy's got nothing on his CV other than failure. How can we look at that and take all 3 of those jobs and just go, no, it'd be different here? And that's what the fans seem to be, saying in pre-season as the kind of optimism point. It will be different here. Well, why is it going to be different here? And as it's now proved, I'm sure we'll discuss some of the kind of reasons why people felt he'd been hard done by, and why we were doing badly outside of Wayne Rooney. you know, outside of that, I'm sure we'll discuss those tonight. But basically, picture is it's 4 failures out of 4 for him, and that to me says it all. You know, so I don't want to point score and go back and say I told you so, because there's no need. But it never ever, to me, was never ever going to work, and I'm just relieved more than anything. That's the overwhelming feeling I've got right now, is just absolute relief that he's gone. He's not our problem anymore. And now we've got 23 games to save our season, and we can stay up. You know, a lot of people are saying it's done, it's over, we're not good enough, we're going down League One, here we come. We can absolutely get out of this. It was shown when Ian Foster got sacked on less than a point per game, his record ended up being. What did we then do with Dewsnip and Nanskaville in charge for the last 5 games? 9 points, more than double the points per game that Foster had. It is possible to get more out of this group of players. And I think, really hope that Nanskaville and Edwards can do that. And then longer term, whoever we get in as our permanent head coach can do that as well.
Absolutely. On that, James, if you're still with us, is this the biggest PR stunt failure in football? Obviously, Birmingham was bad enough, but that, you know, for us to appoint him after that, it was always going to be a complete disaster, wasn't it?
Everything pointed to it being complete disaster, and I tweeted during the sort of aftermath, for the fallout of him being appointed, or the rumours, you know, that led to it in the imminent 24 hours before he was appointed, that, you know, I'm sure we've all hired people in jobs or worked with people in jobs where if there's massive doubts over people, they tend not to magically disappear, and that person comes to massively shine through after all. And that's obviously been the case here. But there was no signs of why we were doing this. Why, you know, what was the reason why we felt that he was going to be a success? Like, what was that underlying data that Simon Hallett pointed to? Because everyone went through all of his previous appointments. There didn't seem to be anything massively standing out in the underlying data of his appointment. So, you know, to answer your question about being the worst PR stunt, well, I don't think it was intended to be a PR stunt. I think I have it on good authority that the appointment was that they thought that Rooney was a likable person, a likable coach that would be a sort of return to the one Argyle philosophy that seemed to have been lost under Foster. And it was a genuine attempt to bring someone in who, despite failing at previous clubs, was well liked and had the interests of the club at heart. But as the tenure's gone on and there's talk of documentaries, and the more cynical of us start to think, well, was it, these perhaps secondary upsides of a great PR exercise for the club, great awareness, the huge spotlight that was put on the club, which may or may not have led to the investment that we're seeing now. Not that we know anything about that of any reason. That it has become a PR exercise. Whether it's been the worst PR exercise in the world or not may not be able to be answered until we complete that investment, or we know what effect or what turn of events have transpired. But at the moment, PR exercise probably successful in terms of points gained and the quality of the football and the state of the club that's being left behind. Certainly a huge failure.
Graham, oh, go on.
Yeah, I was going to say, I did look back. Simon Hallett did on the official website set out the process of recruitment for Wayne Rooney and the other candidates, and it included a personality test and a number of other what I would call corporate mannerisms that the people like that do when they're hiring top managers. And he seemed to be prepared to overlook the data on Wayne Rooney's performance, saying it was Birmingham's spell was too short, and he just tried to justify the appointment in a way that people struggled with. But what I will say, and I think we have forgotten a bit, up until that Blackburn game, I think we played 9 games. how many people said that was one of the best Argyle performances against a decent team with, I think, 7 of the starters in the Oxford game. And we'd only conceded in those 9 games 13 goals. So we had a 2-week international break, and then we had the calamity of Cardiff. I have no idea what went wrong in those 2 weeks. The players were given a week off. I don't know. But from there, it went downhill. So the early signs weren't unpromising. And I think it's only fair on Wayne Rooney's behalf to recognise that. We had some good performance. We beat Sunderland. So we shouldn't forget that. Away from home, apart from Sheffield Wednesday, we weren't getting the tonkings that we've been getting recently. But something went wrong from Blackburn onwards, and we never recovered, and to be honest, never looked like recovering. So, but the interview process, it was a prolonged one. It was over a few weeks. They did a number of things, and they met Wayne Rooney, whether they were starstruck by him, but you could see an argument that, yes, it would enhance the profile of the club. And I think genuinely they had a belief that football-wise, he could do something for the club. They were wrong, fundamentally wrong, and we are where we are now. But I think we just need a little bit of perspective. But any rational person, and I'll hold my hand up, I actually emailed Simon Hallett before the appointment was made. I said, "Are you sure?" And I won't say what the answer was, but he was open to discussion about it. But that was the decision he and Andrew Parkinson made. They are the decision makers. Yes, obviously Neil Dewsnip may have had an input, but they were the 2 decision makers, and that we are where we are now. And now they've made the decision to depart mutually, and it's onwards and upwards, and who knows what's ahead of us. I've just seen that, and I've just heard that Mark Robbins is the new Stoke manager, so he's ruled out. Not that he was a realistic prospect. The options aren't numerous. Championship experience with Alex Neil and Gary Rowett have been appointed recently. Lee's only Neil Harris is an obvious one with Championship experience, but I'm not sure he's the one to lead us. All the weather vanes point towards Stephen Schumacher, who can hit the ground running. He's available. He's got to eat a lot of humble pie, and he mustn't bring any of his former team back with him, not after what happened at Stoke. But if I was in their position, that's where I would be looking at to the end of the season, see how we get on, and if he saves us, then he's worthy of a 2-year contract. That's how I see it.
Yeah, Graham, you beat me to the question. I was going to ask you what the positives were from Rooney's tenure. I suppose there are some, like you said early on, it looked good. And also, we are going to be that team forevermore, that when you tell somebody random that you support Plymouth Argyle, they're going to say, "Oh, weren't you managed by Wayne Rooney?" So I suppose that's one positive, that it's increased our brand a little bit. I know that we haven't got you for long, and you're going to shoot off, yourself and James are going to shoot off soon, but you've touched on it there. Anybody apart from Schumacher, is there anybody that you would be looking to?
No, I can't.
No,
I can't. I really can't see. There's people like Matt Sadler of Walsall, who was on Stoke's radar for a while. But is it right? Somebody young, relatively proven in League Two, can make the jump of 2 leagues and come into the sort of situation we're in. It has to be somebody that knows the club, knows what Argyle stand for. And there's only one person, however that is difficult to bite that bullet, there is only one person that fits that bill to hit the ground running. And how ironic would it be that he goes back to Stoke on Saturday if that was to be the case? But I genuinely can't think of anybody else that would realistically come to us in this situation. And you only have to, people. You look at the so-called betting list. I mean, even Ryan Lowe was on it, for God's sake. I mean, I think we could be pretty convinced he won't be coming back for various reasons. But
well, He was at Home Park recently, wasn't he? Alongside Steven Schumacher, and they both went to the Burnley game away together, didn't they, as well? So
Yeah, they did. Yeah,
never say never.
And I certainly wouldn't go down the Neil Warnock route. I'm sorry, I've just seen it flashed out. You know, his tenure at Aberdeen should tell us all we need to know about.
I think he's pretty cushy up in Torquay anyway, so I can't see him leaving that project anyway. Graham, I think that's you done, isn't it?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much.
We're gonna swap you out with.
And that's
cheers, and you.
Let's hope we get 3 points tomorrow, and it's start of the greatest comeback. That's what we want. Cheers.
Yeah, hopefully so. See you soon. We are awaiting the so-called People's Champion that is Sam Down to join us soon. He said he'd be ready at 20 past. He's not here, so classic Sam. So that's good, isn't it? James, you're about to jump soon as well. Hopefully, if you're still there. Good. I saw you unmute yourself, so that means you must be there. Where's my question? Mike Phelan, obviously he's departed as well. Do you feel for him? Surely he can't have even unpacked his suitcase yet.
I mean, a lot of people touted him as the obvious replacement, didn't they? I saw sort of national level pundit saying that obviously he would be taking over if Rooney was ousted, and that obviously hasn't come to pass. So yeah, I feel for him. I thought I was at the Borough game. I thought we were excellent in the Borough game. Kind of felt that the Swansea game was game zero for him, just coming so quickly after his arrival. So Borough was really his first. Wednesday was his first. Sheffield United was his first game, and then we were excellent at Borough. I thought the first half we pressed excellently. Some of the best football we've seen us play under Rooney. And I think we all thought that was the dawn of a new era of Rooney's tenure. Obviously, it didn't come to pass, and all the old demons came back. So no, I don't feel for him. He came in, and I'm sure he was hoping to reignite his career here, but you know, we don't really know what effect he could have, or whether he was able to stop the rot that had set in. But yeah, it's a shame. But I'm looking forward to on this day a renewal next year of clearing the decks and looking forward the best we can.
Yeah, James, I'm aware that we've not come to you too much. I'm gonna give you a final sign off before obviously you shoot off soon as well. I appreciate it is New Year's Eve and everybody's dropped everything they're doing at the drop of the hat, whereas I have no plans. So I was actually quite excited that I finally had something to do on New Year's Eve. Just final thoughts or anything you want to say? Is there anybody that you'd like to see come in that isn't Steven Schumacher?
Well, like Graham said, I don't really have strong feelings on who would be realistic candidates given our awful predicament that we find ourselves in. With this investment looming, it does make you wonder if there's room for us to be aggressive and go and get a manager that we want, rather than putting a job advert out there and waiting to see who applies. So that's kind of exciting. Obviously, we have no idea whether that investment is realistically imminent, or whether it's at some point in the next 6 months and won't land in time, or whether Hallett will speculate to accumulate and spend some of his own money, knowing that big money is coming in. So it does make you wonder if we'll go and choose a successor that we like from lower down and make them an offer. They can't refuse when we're supposed to have mid-table budget and do to someone what Stoke did to us with Schumacher. I feel like Schumacher ticks so many of the boxes, it seems kind of inevitable at this point. I think if I want to sign off, it's just that there's so many, and I'm going to do a piece on this on One Team in Devon, that there's just so many questions that go unanswered. And I touched on one earlier. Why did we think Rooney was going to be a success, and why was it on us with our meager budget to make that happen? Like, we seem so wedded to his success. Like, I don't know why why we felt that we were the club to make that happen. And we still need to unlock the questions of our away form. We still need to work out what's with the batterings we took away from home this season. Is there a spotlight that'll be shone on the players, and how will that play out under interim and further management? So, I don't think there'll be many fans out there unhappy of what's happened today, and it looks to be huge changes from board level down, below board level and down. It's a huge clearing of decks. It's a huge chance to create something new and a new direction. Whether that's in this league or League One, we'll see.
Yeah, nice. Cheers, James. We'll let you go there. I know, as I said,
Happy New Year, all. Going back to the 9 kids in a shared house we've rented with terrible Wi-Fi. So Happy New Year, all. See you in 2025.
Happy New
Cheers,
Year.
mate. Thank you. And obviously, remember to go and subscribe to One Team in Devon. Sorry, Dan, I'm going to make the main man the big picture there. As Jack says, it looks like Sam has just got out of bed. Dan, I will come to you first quickly, though, before we get Sam Down's initial thoughts. Obviously, everybody would have heard them nationwide on ITV earlier. I say nationwide, West Country wide. I don't think he made the cut nationally. But obviously, Mike Phelan's gone. Simon Ireland departs too. Just how imperative is it that the next manager / head coach brings their own staff?
Yeah, it is absolutely essential. Not for me.
That's not you. Let's mute you. Go on, Dan.
Well, I think it's absolutely essential, isn't it? Of course it is. Yeah. As the drum I will keep on banging has been, and this is the main reason I think Rooney does deserve a lot of the blame for these poor results this season, is good managers and good coaches make players better. It's as simple as that. It's hugely important that we get the most out of the squad that we have, and that's why I think the whole kind of Lowe and Schumacher era was so good at. Especially the title-winning season under Schumacher, and how we started in the Championship under him, was making the most of what we had. We didn't have as much money, and we don't have as much money as a lot of the clubs in this league. They will chuck money left, right, and centre at players and coaches and whatever, but we can outsmart them. They waste a lot of money. Look at Stoke appointing Schumacher, and then he gets them out of trouble, has them 13th, and then they sack him again to get this other bloke in, who they've now also sacked. They waste money. We can outsmart teams. We got Lewis Gibson on a free last summer. We got Finn Azaz on loan. We dropped $1 million on Morgan Whittaker, who then made Championship Team of the Season. All good investments. If we can find a manager and a coaching team that can recruit smartly and get the most out of those players and make them play as a team, because that's something Rooney really did not do, we can survive in this league, 100%. I really do believe that even from the position that we're in, if we get this managerial appointment right, we will get out of trouble. It will be tough for sure, and it's going to be probably a fair chance it will go down to the wire again like it did last season. But I really do think we can get out of this. And that's why a lot of confidence will have been, lost in Hallett and Parkinson for the 2 bad appointments, the wrong appointments that have been made in Ian Foster and Wayne Rooney. But they now have a chance to get things right with this appointment, and it's really, really critical that they do. I was going to circle back to kind of this point around getting the most out of players, because I think a thing that I've seen a lot of is the theme of these players just aren't good enough. That's been trotted out so much in defence of Wayne Rooney, basically. Oh, well, who else could we possibly get in that's going to do any better? And I appreciate that with the players that he signed, it's difficult to kind of judge. However, for me, if you look at the players that were here 12 to 18 months ago, Houghton, Gibson, Whittaker, Galloway, Mumba, Hardy, their form compared to 12 to 18 months ago is terrible. They all look worse than they did back then. So is that just a wild coincidence that they've all dropped off? Or is it the manager and the coaching staff not getting the most out of those players? And that, to me, is the main reason why it's indisputable that Wayne Rooney was not doing a good enough job. And if we get the right manager and the right coaching staff in, they will get the most out of those players, and we can get out of this.
So what you're saying there, Dan, is that we need to be really clever with some like underlying data. That's what I'm getting from that.
Well, yeah, and going back to what Simon Hallett said in his interview with TalkSport when he said, oh, actually, Rooney's underlying data wasn't that bad and he improved the defence and attack at DC United and all this. Well, I'm sure he's looked at the underlying data from this season, which shows that we are bottom of the league by basically every single metric going. Our XG and our XG against and chances created and touches in the box, all that stuff is terrible. Even worse than the number of points we have, and we're still bottom of the league. That to me says how bad a job he's done.
Sam Down, fresh from ITV fame, as has already been mentioned. I now understand why you stand up, because I've used 2 of your chairs and they both squeak like mad, which isn't great for an audio-based platform. But neither is a big echoey room, and I'm coming to you live from there as well. So, you know, beggars can't be choosers, I suppose. Initial thoughts on the Rooney departure?
Yeah, the word I gave in the ITV interview that you so kindly mentioned earlier was relief. Relief that I think we now have thankfully given ourselves a chance at staying up in this league. I mean, might just find myself repeating a lot of what other people have said in terms of the reaction. It's, you know, how on earth did we even appoint him? We've kind of tried to justify it as best we can after the fact, but if anybody had said in that day or two before it broke and before he suddenly shot down to the bottom of the odds, who would have been your top 10, 20, or even 50 picks for the new Plymouth Argyle manager, I don't think Wayne Rooney would have featured in the top 50 probably for any. Certainly not the top 10 or 20.
We quite literally put together a list of 100 managers that could take over the role before Ian Foster, and I'm not even sure he made that.
Well, he was still employed by Birmingham at that time, in fairness.
There were other managers that were still employed at that time that were on the list.
True.
But you carry on.
But yeah, relief is the underlying emotion, because I was a little bit worried that maybe the club were going to dig their heels in a bit and say, no, you know what, Phelan's only been here a few weeks. It's not long enough to judge. Let's give Rooney January. You know, we heard Neil Dewsnip say in the press not long ago, we had a couple of players lined up already. So I just had that fear that that was going to be the way it was going to go, that they were going to really dig their heels in it and give him more time and almost be too embarrassed to admit, actually, you know, we're not going to say that we've made 2 bad appointments in a row. We're going to give him more and more time to actually prove ourselves right. And I'm glad they didn't do that, because ultimately it had become a complete lost cause by the end. That's not to say, like, you know, it was a lost cause the whole time. I think Graham made some very good points earlier regarding, you know, that little run from the Sunderland to the Blackburn game. That was 3 home wins and 3 home performances in a row that were good to very good. Sunderland, Luton and Blackburn. So I did genuinely have hope at that time, even if I may have sort of deluded myself into hope following the pre-season situation. I think over time he did give us reasons to believe there might be actual genuine hope. But yeah, like Graham said, whatever happened then after the Cardiff game.
Too soon, Sam. Too soon.
Come again?
Too soon.
Oh, yes. Whatever happened, you know, from the Cardiff game and thereafter was appalling, because we looked the complete shadow of the team we were, even in the games that we did get points, like that incredible comeback, 3-0 down to 3-3 against Preston, great last minute equaliser at home to Watford as well, and even the win against Pompey. And none of those performances will be good. And in fact, after that Blackburn game, we only had 2 good performances in which we got 1 point out of a possible 6. And it's sort of a shame for Rooney that we saved those 2 good performances for games that we were coming up against very strong opponents, and the good performances weren't quite enough to win those games. All in all, it has been a complete and total failure. The results have been bad. The performances by and large have been even worse. I think I wouldn't necessarily say we're lucky to have as many points as we had, because I think whilst that was true going into Sheffield United and Middlesbrough, we could easily have got as many as 4, if not 6 points from that, which maybe balances it out a bit. But I certainly don't think we're unlucky. We certainly shouldn't have any more points than we do. And ultimately, we are bottom of the league and 4 points out. So it had to be done. I was a little bit worried they might give him too much time, but thankfully they've not. The board have made the right decision. I think Neil Dewsnip will surely be going along with him. I think that's enough people who are, reasonably well informed on the goings on at Argyle, on Passotti and elsewhere, seem very convinced that Neil Dewsnip is out the door. And thank you to him for a very long and ultimately successful tenure with the club. He's been at the club for 5.5 years, of which the first 4.5 were incredibly successful. And I'm just ashamed about the remaining 12 months that he's had with ourselves. But I think it is a new era, and that can be exciting. And maybe I won't go into too much about how that will look now, because I'm sure there's other questions coming. But my overwhelming feeling is one of relief that we're not going to keep on digging our heels in. We're not going to keep on with this failed experiment, and we can move on and give ourselves the best hope of getting 3 points.
Absolutely. So I'm going to come back to you, because I know Dan's answer on this, but obviously one of the greatest footballers England has ever produced. He clearly wanted a job in management, clearly wanted this to work. Is part of you gutted that it didn't?
Sorry, was that one for me or for Dan?
For you, Sam, yeah.
For me. Yeah, part of me is gutted it didn't, absolutely. And again, I'm sure people, I can already see the comments, oh, you don't mention that you met Wayne Rooney in Spain, because, we've mentioned it a few times, but we did meet Wayne Rooney in Spain, and Pete Shuttleworth and Neil Dewsnip, and we had long chats with all 3 of them. And I think if anybody had said that just 5.5 months later, none of those people would any longer be employed by the club, we'd have been, quite disappointed and upset by that, because we really wanted it to work, didn't we? I think Wayne Rooney was, I think you could tell his enthusiasm, his infectious love for the game was clear for all to see. He gave some really interesting tactical comments about how he sees his style of football working, real insight on what it's like to play at the highest level. And Pete Shuttleworth, as I mentioned on the podcast after he left to be replaced by Mike Phelan, he said how privileged and how humble he was to be at Plymouth Argyle. I don't think it's worked out well for any of them, as we know, for Rooney on the pitch, and I think, for his own well-being, I'm not sure being in Plymouth is the best thing for him off the pitch either. I won't elaborate any further on that. It's just if you've seen Twitter, you'll know what I'm referring to. But I think it's sad how it's ended, how it has, because I think he's very clearly was somebody who absolutely came into this with the right attitude. He he didn't have to do this. I know it's a bit of I know we didn't have to offer him a job either, but from his point of view, it would have been so easy for him just to do the easy thing, to stay on the punditry circuit, to stay doing, match of the day and what have you. But he threw himself into a very tough job with one of the lowest budgets in the league, and he gave it a good go. And it just didn't work out. So am I sad in a way? Yes, I absolutely am. And I'm sad it's ended in such a sour fashion as well. But it could have been even more sour if he hadn't have agreed. Let's not forget, this is a mutual consent, by the way. This is clearly it's Argyle have wanted to make this change, but clearly Wayne Rooney's also wanted to go. Otherwise, it wouldn't be mutual consent. And I know that you could say that's all the line of, they just said it's mutual consent. But if you look at Wayne Rooney's response to the interview after the Oxford game, he basically said, it might be time to leave. And I think in hindsight, we maybe slept on that quote a little bit in the 2 nights in between. So I am a bit sad, but I'm not as sad for him as I am happy for Argyle, is the honest answer. I'm happy for Argyle that we might have a better chance of staying up, or if not staying up, certainly appointing a manager who is going to give us the best possible chance of going straight back up out of League One.
Yeah, Dan, before we get to some of the starred questions and talk about who's next, just want your thoughts. Do you reckon he gets another crack at management somewhere? Like, I'm thinking the class of '92 Salford City, or maybe over in Saudi. Do you think he gets one more crack?
That seems to be the link people are making, isn't it? Salford, or go abroad somewhere for a paycheck. I think it will be very, very difficult now. 3 failures out of 3 is alarming. Obviously, it wasn't alarming enough for Argyle's decision makers to appoint him, but 4 failures out of 4 is almost kind of past the point of no return, isn't it? I think he'll have to, if he does stay in England, he'll have to drop down. I don't see another Championship club touching him. I'm not sure I see a League One club touching him, to be honest. And yeah, the Salford connection aside, can you see him dropping down to League Two? I'm really not sure. It feels more likely that he will perhaps go abroad or just go back to, as Sam said, back to the kind of punditry or podcasts where he can say how hard done by he was at Plymouth Argyle and all that stuff. We shall see. We shall see.
In a way, he was sort of on a hiding to nothing, right? Because like success for us was just staying up, whereas in the wider footballing world, just keeping Plymouth Argyle up in the Championship isn't, a huge feat. So I don't think he was ever really going to turn around his reputation with us anyway, right?
But then you could say that kind of played to his favour in that, if he did keep us up.
Yeah,
look at the comments after those 9 games that Graham alluded to. We were on 11 points from 9 games. And all those, a lot of the kind of national social media accounts and football accounts, all that stuff that had been mocking our appointment of him, were now putting out stuff like, you know what, fair play to Wayne Rooney. We were too quick to write him off. He's gone down there and he's doing a fantastic job. And I was thinking, yeah, it's a solid start, but it's 9 games. Steady on a minute. Let's actually see how this pans out. Our underlying data already wasn't looking great. I think a lot of us were thinking performances probably need to improve. Otherwise, the points total is going to start going towards that, what the data suggested. So no, I think they were somewhat prematurely kind of going against that and saying, no, actually, fair play, we were wrong. It didn't seem that it was just way too early to kind of be making comments like that, in my opinion. And yeah, I don't see that's how it played with his job here at all.
Just looking at, who's next. Steven Schumacher, just looking at some odds. Steven Schumacher is 1-2 on. Ryan Lowe 6-1. Tony Mowbray 8-1. I can't see him. He never goes any further south than Birmingham, so I can't see that happening. Neil Harris might be a reasonable appointment. Russell Martin at 20-1. Can't see that either. Eric Ten Hag at 33-1, which would be unbelievable. Sam, I think we know who you would prefer in, but say it wasn't Steven Schumacher, whoever it is, the board can't be as slow as last time to appoint them, can they?
No. Well, if you look at the timescales, from Steven Schumacher going to Ian Foster being appointed was, I think, just over 2 weeks, because Foster was appointed the Friday night before the Sutton home game in the FA Cup. Mm-hmm. From the end of the season, because obviously we weren't really actively recruiting whilst the season was going on. We were focusing on staying up. But from the end of the season to Wayne Rooney being appointed was, I think, slightly longer still. That was just under 3 weeks. There does seem to be a 2 to 3 week process so far. But we absolutely cannot have another 2 to 3 week process, because quite aside from the fact we might end up having to recruit another director of football, again, yet to be confirmed, but I would have a pretty high confidence that will be the news coming out within the next 24 hours. Quite aside from that, we still obviously have to find a new head coach. And until we get at least one of those people in, if not both, we can't really go too much on player recruitment, can we? I know we may have a couple of irons in the fire, but we're not going to be proactively looking for more players without either a head coach or a director of football. So it is absolutely, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a baptism of fire for whoever comes in, isn't it? Both from the head coach side and the director of football side. So yeah, it cannot take 2 or 3 weeks. I think we have to line up a first choice candidate, make them the offer, and if they don't accept, or if for whatever reason it all falls through, we look at an alternative option. I think it's got to be as simple as that. We all know who my first choice would be. I've said it so many times. I've mentioned it on Twitter today as well. I absolutely think we've got to throw everything we can at Steven Schumacher. Football, quite aside from his good record, football is about emotion in a way. And I know that maybe the decision makers don't make decisions with emotion, but from the fans' point of view, I think this is one where emotion goes hand in hand with logic, because he's got as good a CV as anyone we're going to get. I don't think he failed at Stoke whatsoever. I think he was the victim of probably internal politics, and John Walters really wanted to bring in his own man, and that just went terribly. And I think they were kind of looking for any excuse to sack him, really. He was meant to be one game away from the sack in about March and April, and then supposedly they talked to managers at the end of last season as well. So they were just looking for an excuse to sack him. I don't think he failed at Stoke. And he certainly didn't fail with ourselves in the first half of the season with Argyle. And I certainly, at the time, probably didn't realise how good we had it with Shuey in that August to December 2023 period. There were things I was moaning about in the sense of there were a few teething problems with the 4-3-3 transition. Obviously, we didn't win away under him, but we were certainly much better, much more likely to get a draw and much closer to winning away from him than what we have been under Wayne Rooney. Or even Neil Dewsnip as caretaker. As good as he was at home, he wasn't any better away. So I think Steven Schumacher absolutely has to be the one. Yes, of course, there are examples of when going back goes badly. But as the quote on our screen from Robin's Nest says, there are also examples of when somebody's gone back and done incredibly well. Eddie Howe returning to Bournemouth is probably the foremost example. I could probably also raise you Harry Redknapp returning to Portsmouth, Nathan Jones returning to Luton, Tony Pulis returning to Stoke. All of those had second spells that were more successful than their first spells, not less. Steve Bruce returning to Wigan. I could add on a rather more international level, Fabio Capello returning to Real Madrid. You could probably keep going with examples of successful second spells at clubs. So yeah, I would go for Schumacher. I don't really agree. I must say, with Graham's earlier point about the backroom team, yes, I think what was it? Elliot Turner put a few tweets out that were a bit provocative, but Elliot Turner was, by all accounts, a very good strength and conditioning coach. We certainly didn't have as many injuries under him. We looked far more resilient fitness-wise under him than we probably have done since. And Mark Hughes, I think the only thing on his sort of charge sheet, if you like, is that he tried to get into the club to get some paperwork or whatever on the morning after the departure was confirmed. And we did the right thing not letting him in because, it's corporate espionage, whatever. But at the end of the day, I'm sure he was going in just with maybe not the best possible motives, but with certainly very rational motives. If we poached a manager from another club, I wouldn't hold it against them that they tried to go into their old club and, whatever, get the paperwork together. But obviously we were rightly not to let him in, but it's not been a sin from his point of view.
That's great. And also, I'm just going to cut you up a sec because we've only got 10 minutes before Joe takes over and Chris Errington and a couple of others, I can't remember who else, joins the podcast. Oh, actually, Sam, you're staying on, aren't you? So don't need you to talk anymore for now. Actually, I do want you to talk for now. But if you've got any questions for Chris Errington or Joe, make sure you get them in because I haven't asked any of the starred questions. But Sam, the question I asked you, if not Schumacher, then who? Can you just give me a name?
Tony Mowbray.
Okay, that's not going to happen. Dan Ellard, as much as I love to use the rat emoji when it comes to Luke Cundall and Elliot Turner and Steven Schumacher, and I will be using that in future pod promotions, even if they do come back and do well for us. Is there any names that you want to throw into the hat that aren't Steven Schumacher?
To be brutally honest, I'm still just kind of processing today's news and just as Sam used the word, overwhelming relief that he's no longer our problem and we're going to get someone else in. I hate using the phrase, it couldn't be any worse. We hear that way too much, in my opinion. However, I do think it pretty much couldn't be any worse, whoever we get in. So even, the temporary caretaker stewardship of Nance Cobble and Joe Edwards, who who knows how good a tactician Joe Edwards is, but one thing's for sure, they will fire that dressing room up. They will get them singing off that same hymn sheet, and will be maybe not playing with any more quality tactically, but we'll be playing with a hell of a lot of heart if Joe Edwards is at the wheel. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that goes in the short term.
I said at the start of this pod that I've done absolutely zero prep, but I think for the first time ever, I've got more questions than I need. And I haven't even got round to the start one. So I'll leave that for you, Joe. I can see you sat backstage nodding away and smiling. But Dan, you mentioned it there. Obviously, Kevin Nanskiville takes charge, caretaker charge for the 5th time at Plymouth Argyle Football Club, obviously alongside Joe Edwards. How does that affect tomorrow, do you think?
It's a bit like John Sheridan at Oldham, isn't it? You know, the number of spells he's had getting to this stage. But I think, as I say, just there'll be a hell of a lot of heart in the team. We saw when it was Nanskiville and Dewsnip at the back end of last season, how the team really did come together. Probably a bit more of a kind of case for them to all come together because Ian Foster was peeing off key players and you know, kind of ripping the kind of team spirit apart with his crazy actions. But I do think that they are just seem to be extremely likable characters, both of them. And it's that kind of cliche that you'd want to run through a brick wall for them. And I really do think that the players will get behind that. How we'll set up tactically will be interesting. I mean, obviously, I guess it depends on who's available. Even Whittaker and Hardy obviously started against Oxford. There's some talk that they weren't quite fit. Will they be able to start? Obviously, I think, is Callum Wright back, Sam, or is he 3-game ban?
Violent conduct, so that's a 3-gamer. He will be back, for the
Brentford,
game after for Brentford, yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay, so we still haven't got him, but yeah, I do think, really not sure how we will set up. We might even go 3 at the back. Might perhaps go 2 up front. Perhaps be a good idea. Andre Gray up front on his own hasn't really seemed to work to this point. Whether we can get the kind of support in behind him, get Whittaker more central, perhaps it'll be interesting to see. But kind of whoever starts and whatever the system is. I see in the comments there someone saying about 4-3-3 Houghton CDM. I'd absolutely go with that if possible. I think Houghton was such a key player last season in terms of protecting that back four, playing out from the back on with his back to goal and distributing to the fullbacks was a really kind of key part of how we built up our play. And I'd like to see him back in the fold. I think it's baffling how few minutes he's had this season so far. But yeah, like I say, whoever starts really, I think they will play with a lot of heart, and it will be really encouraging to see. It's not going to be a magic fix. I know full well we're not going to start winning every week just because Wayne Rooney's been sacked. Mutual consent. But I do think it is going to get better from this point.
Sam, I'll give you the last question because I know that you'll be able to fill 6 minutes easily. 2,500 plus watching live, which is absolutely mental. A bit annoying that they didn't sack him. Mutual consent part ways with him next year so we can get the views on 2025's YouTube rankings rather than this year's, but oh well, it's what it is. I was weirdly looking forward to tomorrow because I thought it was going to be a bit of a bloodbath at Home Park. The atmosphere tomorrow is going to be absolutely electric, isn't it?
Yeah, it's been a bit of a bloodbath in the sacking department today, hasn't it? With 3 departures confirmed and maybe a 4th soon to come, but not so much one at Home Park. I think one thing I said earlier on in I think to ITV, did I mention I've been on ITV? Just saying, was that I was very glad they did do that. And as much as we feel, there's almost a sort of like devilment about it, isn't there? Of, oh my goodness, I can't wait to see how bad it gets. In what you're alluding to, it could get really toxic in that way. I'm glad it isn't going to go that way. I really am glad, because ultimately nobody wants that. Nobody wants personal, vile stuff being said. Not that would be happening by many, but there's always a few. Nobody wants to be going to the football and going home angry and coming home all head up and ruining your evening. So And whilst, nobody will know how bad it would have got. Maybe that would have been like the equivalent of the Middlesbrough game for Foster, where we got a surprise result and it brought him a bit of time. Who knows? But yeah, you're not wrong. If we had have gone out there with Wayne Rooney in charge, and we'd conceded early, we'd gone 1 or 2 down early, it would have been a very, very unpleasant atmosphere indeed. There would have been a lot of chanting, a lot of booing, a lot of negativity. And thankfully, we're going to avoid that, because whatever happens, like the perfect example is that Birmingham game where, ironically, Wayne Rooney was in the opposite dugout, which was the first game after Schumacher left for Stoke. Even then, when we went 2-0 down quite early in that game, certainly in the first half, we were 2-0 down, the fans were very much still behind the team, giving full support. We've got to do that. It's going to be a very tough day. Bristol City are absolutely no mugs. It's going to be swirling winds, torrential rain. It's going to be one for the fighters out there tomorrow. We've got to give them all the backing we can from the stands. It's going to be a packed out home park, packed out away end as well. We've got to make sure we outsing them. And you know what? I do think little things like that can absolutely make a difference. That home advantage is a thing for a reason. And sometimes I just feel that psychologically we can get them that extra yard over the line, that extra bit of oomph, that extra bit of power. And I think we can absolutely help with that. And yes, whilst there is a little bit of me, like Aaron said, there is that sort of grim, morbid curiosity of almost wanting to see how bad it would have got if he had stayed. The more serious part of me is very thankful that's now not going to happen, and hopefully we'll have full support for the team tomorrow.
Some of our best days at home park as well have come after adversity. You may have just said this, Sam. I wasn't really listening. I was playing about with the YouTube settings in the background, but they've come after recent dismissals and sackings and stuff. Haven't they? The best days.
Well, yeah, obviously the one I mentioned was the Birmingham game after Schumacher left for.
Yeah, I thought you'd mention it, but like I said, tough.
Well, the one that wasn't directly a game after a sacking, but was obviously an enormous home game shortly after Ian Foster's sacking, was of course the famous Leicester game last season, which I'm sure Neil Dewsnip won't mind me sharing that he said to me in Spain in pre-season that those 2 nights against Leicester and Hull were 2 of the best of his career, and I think. As I said, there were two of the best nights. 2 of the best days and nights for me to be a fan as well. But both of those were, and that Leicester game, I don't think I've ever heard Home Park rocking and bouncing from minute 1 to 90 quite like I have that night, even in any of the promotion games. It's never been quite as raucous and vociferous as that night. We need to bring that same energy and that same atmosphere to the game tomorrow. And it's going to be an early kickoff. I'm sure there'll be a few with sore heads after New Year's Eve. But get yourself a bottle of water or a can of energy drink or something and perk yourselves up, because they're going to need us tomorrow.
I've heard that dragon soup's quite good for the caffeine, right?
Yeah. There are other caffeinated alcoholic beverages are available on this podcast.
A rallying cry from Sam Down. Get you in that dressing room, mate.
Maybe that'll, like Mikel Arteta likes to get fans into the dressing room, doesn't need to give rousing speeches, so maybe the new manager will follow the lead. Just a quick point on because I think we're kind of going away from Rooney now and what his next job will be. I think what Aaron said is pertinent on the previous podcast. If he really does want to be a manager, because let's not forget he is still only 39. A lot of people don't even get their first managerial job until they're kind of in their early 40s, never mind their 5th managerial job. So he has still got time. If he really, and if he wants to just settle down and be a pundit and just think, I've tried and I've failed, fair play to him. If he really wants to be a manager, he's got to do the full circuit. He's got to travel around, look at great coaches, look at what they do, and learn from them. Just taking the next job that comes up, I think that's going to turn his record to 5 out of 5. And I suppose, actually, the question is, who is even going to offer him one? Because I know that everyone sort of said Salford, but actually thinking about it, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, because they're currently in the playoffs of League Two with Carl Robinson, who's got a much better CV. And actually, the class of 92, if you look at their appointments they've made so far, Carl Robinson, Neil Wood, Gary Bowyer, Richie Wellens, none of those are really part of the class of 92. And only one of those, Neil Wood, had even a tenuous connection to Man United. The rest of them were all complete outsiders. So they don't really appoint their mates, to be fair. So I think probably the most likely chance that he would get a job would be Saudi Arabia. And Well, I don't know if the culture would perhaps agree with him out in Saudi Arabia, dare I say. So I think he's got to do the circuit. He's got to learn the ropes and come back better if he's going to. If not, stick to punditry, which I think he is actually pretty good at.
Yeah, I think we'll call that an end to the first half before Sam gets us cancelled. Sam's staying on, so all there is for me to say is thank you, Dan. Thanks for joining us, and welcome back to the Argyle Life family, and no longer just a friend of the pod, as Sam calls you. And
Cheers.
That's it from me for the year, unless anything major drops. But I think I'll leave it in Joe's capable hands. Sitting backstage are Chris Errington and Nick Saunders-Smith alongside Joe, so I'll leave you in their company, and I'll just do the awkward bit where like everybody switches around and we do this. But have a good new year, because 2025 literally cannot be any worse than 2024. Cheers, guys.
Cheers, guys. Happy New Year.
Cheers, Aaron. Cheers, Dan. Yes, I get the proper shift. I get the really good guests. I do. Welcome to the second half, the better half of tonight's emergency podcast. Delighted to be joined by Nick. Many of you will know him now as the Argyle analyst on X, and extremely delighted. I always get the pleasure of getting Chris Errington on my part of these emergency pods. Chris, good evening. Hope you're well.
Complete coincidence, isn't it?
It's very weird. It's very weird.
But thank you for the invite. Thanks for the invite and joining you.
No problem at all. It's been a long day for us doing our media interviews. I'd imagine it's been one of the longest days of the year for you as well, isn't it?
I haven't been able to keep up with you guys. You've been everywhere. I hope you've got good agents.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping mine's not on commission, but just sum up your day, really. When did you first get whiff that all was changing?
Yeah, I mean, I logged on at 8:30 this morning thinking it was going to be a reasonably quiet day, and probably more thinking about the game tomorrow, getting ready for stuff like that. And then there was a few whispers, weren't there, around, I don't know, about 9:30, something like that. And then it soon became clear what had gone on last night with the board meeting, from which I understand was quite lengthy. And I think probably a fair bit of soul searching went on during the course of that meeting. I'm sure we'll find out a bit more about it in due course. But this is a tough call for Argyle to make. I mean, I've had the privilege of reporting on the club for a long time, certainly under Simon Hallett's ownership. Argyle don't make short-term decisions. They don't really go for knee-jerk. They always look at the mid to long term. And so I do find I still struggle to get my head around the fact that Plymouth Argyle, under Simon Hallett, have changed their head coach twice in the same calendar year. That is very much out of character, very much what they do not want to be doing. But here as we sit on New Year's Eve, that's the position they're in.
It is. And I'm going to throw this one straight at you. Did you get a sense when you asked Wayne Rooney on Sunday night whether or not he was considering his position, and he didn't come out immediately and rebuke it by saying, I'm the man, I still have full belief in my ability. Did you get a sense then that perhaps a change might be coming, whether it was Wayne's decision or the club's?
Yes, because I think he responded by saying, I think you have to consider all options when you're going through a run of results like this. That was the first thing he said. That was probably the thing I most took out of the interview we did with him after the game against Oxford. He didn't shy away from the fact that was a possibility, So I wasn't surprised. It's not a lot of fun. Again, I'm in the position where I can get to see managers in good times, but also in bad times. And you get to see them close up. And I get that everyone sees Wayne Rooney when he's in charge, but to see him stood by the side of the pitch half an hour after another defeat, he did look very down. Now, he would be. No manager likes losing games of football, but it did look as though a bit of the spark, the fire in the belly might have gone by then. I don't know if that was the case, but it felt like it. And you see, it's one of the things I've enjoyed about covering Argyle with Wayne Rooney as Argyle's head coach is that you get to see a little bit, only a little bit, but a little bit of what Wayne Rooney is about, this world famous football icon who we all watched and I think we probably all admired as a player. And there he is, stood on the side of the pitch after Argyle have got beaten again by Oxford. And you're stood there asking him questions that I particularly don't want to ask. He doesn't want to particularly answer, but that is the situation we were in. And, on a personal level, I found him, I found him a really down-to-earth, humble guy, answered every question that was asked of him. And I think like a lot of the Argyle fans, I wanted it to work. I hoped it would work, but I don't think it was going to work, was it? So I think the change had to be made.
And obviously, we know that the injury crisis has depleted the squad for the majority of the autumn into the early winter, isn't it? And I don't think any of us can doubt Wayne's passion for the job and things. Was that clear to you in all the press conferences? Obviously, we see it through a camera on Argyle TV, but did you get that through his body language? And perhaps in these last couple of games, have you seen as things have worn him down, i.e. the tough defeat at Sheffield United, which frankly I don't think any of us would agree that we deserved, and then the hammering on Boxing Day, and then obviously Sunday. Did you see a gradual decline in that body language in the press conferences yourself?
Yes, not massively, but yes. But that comes with the territory of a manager in charge of a team that is losing way more games than they'd want to. No manager's going to want to be in that situation. His passion, I think his passion is best exemplified by the fact that he didn't need to be the Argyle head coach. He can do TV punditry, as I caught you just saying a minute ago. He could do whatever he wants in life. He's in the fortunate position. I'm pretty sure that he can choose exactly what he wants to do for the rest of his life. So the fact that he was up and ready and keen to come down all the way down to Plymouth to be the head coach, he would have known that the budget was not going to be the biggest. He will have known that if he failed at Argyle, it could be the end of his ambitions of being a manager long term. And he took on all of those challenges, responsibilities. You, like I, probably saw the pictures of him celebrating goals earlier on the season when it looked like it was going to possibly work out. Look at the enthusiasm, the passion. The Blackburn game, he got sent off because he got too passionate. The passion was there, but football is a grueling business to work in. And if you're losing games, pressure is put on you. You put yourself under pressure. And in those closing press conferences, yes, at Coventry on Boxing Day, and then by the side of the pitch at Oxford, you could just feel that, yeah, maybe there was a little bit of the fire going. And you just hoped that maybe they could have got a win somewhere. That the Middlesbrough game, obviously, in hindsight, looks really important. If they'd won that one 3-2, we probably wouldn't be sat here now, would we? But that's in the history, and Wayne Rooney's moving on.
Yeah, I mean, a question for you that is sort of one that, well, first of all, you obviously wrote the article the other day about it's almost boom or bust, wasn't it, coming into January, that they either need to back Rooney or they need to, make the change. And obviously they've done that. You mentioned in there that you wrote to the club for comment from Simon Hallett, Andrew Parkins and Neil Jusnip. Have you heard back from the club about that? Is there anything in the pipeline that is possible? Obviously, we know we got a couple of games coming up in quick succession, but have you had a response about that?
Nothing in the pipeline at the moment, but I'm hopeful something will get sorted out pretty soon. As you say, I think one of the issues is there's an awful lot of games at the moment, and just getting people together. And then after the Oxford game, I would imagine there's been conversations been going on at high levels pretty much ever since. So I don't think I was ever going to get to speak to them between Oxford and now, because they were probably deciding things themselves. But I've always had a pretty good relationship with the club, certainly now, and hopefully I'll get the chance to speak to them. I would say this, wouldn't I? But I do think they've got a little bit away from the communication and keeping fans up to date. Doesn't necessarily have to be with me personally. I'd like it to be through me that I get to speak to the people concerned at the club, because I think through Plymouth Live and the Herald, that's the best way for the club to express their views in an external media setup. But I do think it's important that a football club in this day and age communicates as much as it can. The danger you run when you don't do that is that leaves a vacuum, particularly in social media, that will be filled by other stuff. And sometimes, a lot of the times, that stuff isn't necessarily stuff that's helpful to a happy, positive atmosphere at a football club. So sometimes it's best maybe to be proactive with communications rather than reactive. That's just my personal opinion. I'm not saying I'm right or wrong, but that's, how I would look at it.
We are getting some questions in, Chris, so we will come to that in a second. One question came in on Twitter this afternoon from Kenny Pester. And first of all, I echo, and I think we all echo what he says, and it's thanks to you for giving up your time on New Year's Eve. Obviously, we know we've got you till 7:30. He says he thinks it's right that we only hear from your side of the fence, obviously, on what's going on. He does have a question for you, which is what brought about the change in tone in reporting over the last week? Because obviously we did have that article after the Oxford game. What was the thinking behind the article and the tone of it?
I've been journalist for a long time now, Joe, and my experience through times you learn things. You get a gut feeling for things. I've covered the club in its administration times and things, so I've seen the highs and lows, and there usually comes a tipping point in a situation where what might initially feel like speculation, a bit of sort of stirring things up a bit, it starts to think, hang on a minute, there's more to it than just a bit of speculation. And you ask questions, everyone asks questions about what's going on. And it just felt to me that certainly after the Coventry game, things were headed in this direction. The mood was not good, obviously, understandably. And I try not to jump onto the bandwagon of things. I try to do it when objectively things are right and it's the right time. And I think post Coventry was the first time this year where I really felt that Wayne wasn't going to see the job through. Up until then, take the Middlesbrough game, led 3 times. If they could have nicked that one and won it, different story. But could they build on that? And to go to Coventry on Boxing Day, to lose 4-0, to be 4-0 down at half-time, you ask people's opinions on things. It just felt like things changed after that Coventry game.
Is that going back to your point then? Is that why you were surprised there perhaps was a little bit of silence going into the Oxford game? Obviously, we from Argyle's side of things, we had the post-match interview on Argyle TV. Then there was just no communication, it felt like, until the team sheet was released on Sunday afternoon. Is that what surprised you most?
I just feel that there was going to be lots of comments, criticism after the Coventry game, wasn't there? And that goes back to my point about if you leave a vacuum in the social media age that we live in, that is going to get filled by other stuff. And that's what happened, isn't it? So to tell Argyle what to do communications wise, I think if you look over the course of the last few years, they've been excellent at communication. but that perhaps highlights the slight downfall or the decline of communication that we've seen in recent times.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, going into tomorrow, we have the dynamic duo, if you like, the dream team in the eyes of many Argyle fans in Kevin Nanscoville and Joe Edwards. Your thoughts on it being those two in particular to lead the troops tomorrow? It's safe to say I think they're going to have 16,000 people right behind them, aren't they?
Apologies to Nick, because I feel like I'm hogging things a little bit, and
we've got Nick and Sam for longer. Don't worry about that.
Please, apologies, Nick. I'm sure you'll get your chance to have a good say, and in detail, I'm sure you'll have plenty of stats and details for us all. Kevin Nanscoville is often called Mr. Argyle, isn't he? I mean, he is a very safe pair of hands. I had to count up today how many times he's actually been in caretaker charge, because it feels like it's happened a lot, and 5 times if you once with Roman Larrier, once on his own, a couple of times with Neil Dewsnip, and now with Joe Edwards. I know Nance a little bit, not brilliantly, but I do know him quite well over the years. He loves Argyle. It's his club. And I'm not saying that using those words lightly. He does. He cares. He feels when things are going great, he loves it. When things are going like they have been doing, trust me, he feels it. And I think he's a great man to have around at the club, particularly at times like this where it is a challenge. And when people say we need to sort of rally around, he's exactly the kind of guy to do it. And as for Joe Edwards, I mean, we've all seen what he's done for the club over the last 5 years as a player. He's made no secret of the fact he'd like to be a coach. I think the fans have made no secret of the fact that they'd like him to be a coach at Argyle. And perhaps this is another step towards that happening in the not too distant future. Good partnership. And as you said, I think all the Argyle fans at Home Park tomorrow will be right behind them. And again, that's another thing about the decision today to move on from Wayne Rooney. Let's be honest, if it had started going badly tomorrow, the atmosphere at Home Park wouldn't have been enjoyable, would it? It would have been Ian Foster, Bristol City Mark II, wouldn't it?
Yeah, the parallels would have been quite uncanny.
It would have been absolutely, completely. So I'm sure come kick-off tomorrow, the atmosphere will be really good. And I'm hoping this isn't the case, but if things aren't going well, I think the fans will hopefully, I'm sure they will, get behind the team, get behind Nance and Joe, because I don't think we could ask for too many more committed people to be taking charge of the Argyle team tomorrow.
If I may just intervene with a question for yourself, Chris.
Hi, Sam.
Hi, Chris. Yeah, great to have you on again. Thank you again.
Thanks for the invite.
Thank you. As you sort of alluded to in your article earlier, a lot of Argyle fans, including myself, I freely admit, are very keen on Stephen Schumacher. And I'm about asking you to, betray any confidence that you may or may not have heard. Knowing Stephen Schumacher as you do, having worked with him for so long, do you think a return to Home Park is something you would consider?
Well, I haven't spoken to him, and I haven't spoken to anyone really particularly about it. It's been a really busy day, so I probably haven't made as many phone calls, particularly about that sort of issue, Sam, i.e. the next head coach, as I ideally would have liked today, and we're still in the very early stages. But I did get to know Shuey well, and the impression that I have been left with since he left the club is that I think he would admit that it wasn't carried out in quite the right way. And I think that if he was offered the opportunity to come back and finish off unfinished business, I think he would take it. I don't know whether he's going to get offered that opportunity, but I would be surprised if he and Simon Hallett didn't have a conversation. Where it goes from there, I don't know. But if they offered him the job, I think he would be very interested in it. Not saying it's going to happen, but there's a fit there, and I think I understand lots of fans, or some fans, might still have misgivings about the way he left, and that's fair enough. But looking for somebody that could come in, steady the ship, knows the club, knows the players, knows the city, it ticks lots of boxes. I mean, there's other good candidates out there as well. Mark Robbins has been mentioned really well. I think that's perhaps, you know, his
going to be
favourite.
announced by Stoke very shortly.
Yeah, so I think that might not be possible, but I think Argyle could do a lot worse than Stephen Schumacher. Yeah, definitely.
Is it kind of time, Chris, do you think? I mean, I canvassed for this back in January before Ian Foster. Is it time that perhaps now a more, if it's not going to be Stephen Schumacher, who I'm very much throwing my weight behind, is it not going to be time for something a little bit more, what's the word, a little bit more experienced, maybe a steadier pair of hands on the runner? Look, we've done great with all these young coaches in the past. Obviously, I know it hasn't worked the last 2 times. Is it time now, with the situation we find ourselves in, to perhaps look at a more wiser head? I see the name Neil Harris keeps popping up in the comments from Millwall. You know, he went into Millwall on a couple of occasions. I think it's more because of his passion for the club, but he made them very hard to break down and very hard to beat. And right now we know that there are, you know, we're about as watertight as a sieve at the back, particularly away from home. Is it time that we maybe get that wise old head in, just for, even if it's just to the end of the season and then reassess in the summer?
Yeah, Neil Harris is a good shout. I saw that Millwall team play against Argyle in October, and yes, they weren't the most fluent, attractive team you've ever seen in your life, but they were competitive. They were better than Argyle on the night, and I think he did a really good job at Millwall, didn't he? And yeah, if he was appointed by Argyle, I don't think that would be a bad call at all. So I do think we have to look for the best candidate. And if the best candidate is a young up-and-coming coach, fine. But not be blinkered to the fact that there might be other people out there who are better for the job. I'm sure I said this at the time before Wayne Rooney was appointed, but if it had been me in the summer, I would have given somebody like Gary Rowett a really good look. Now, I appreciate I'm saying that now after Gary Rowett's gone into Oxford and won his first 2 games. And but I'm pretty sure I said that somewhere, that I think Gary Rowett would have been an experienced championship manager, been there, done it. Not always worked at the biggest clubs, so would be used to sort of budgetary constraints and things like that, but made teams effective and hard to beat. And unfortunately, he's now at Oxford. But again, I would agree with your point that somebody like him with a track record like that, you've got to give serious consideration to. So, yeah, I agree. I think if it's a young manager, the next one, if it's whoever it is, fine. But let's not disregard the wider pool of managers out there, and let's pick the best one.
I've got one final question, and it's coming from Rob, and it's all around the investor side of things. I think it was because obviously the bombshell was dropped down in Cornwall at the start of December by Simon Hallett. It's a bit of a 2-pronged question, really. Number one, did you have inkling that something might have been a bombshell might have been dropped that night?
No.
But that's that question answered. And number two, how, you know, obviously Simon Hallett's keeping the cards close to the chest. Obviously, it's the EFL approval that process has to go through, and we don't know how long that's going to take. Were you surprised that he chose that particular night in a working men's club 30 miles away from the city and things to drop such a big bombshell that all of a sudden our spending power is going to go to the middle of the championship, and, you know, we're really excited to have this investor on board if it gets approved?
Yes, I was very much surprised, and yeah, I was glad I drove all the way down to St Dennis working men's club to hear him tell that. Now, obviously, that came off the back of some bad results, didn't it? And I know that there's a view among some people out there that by dropping in this big investor news, it would maybe take some of the heat off the situation over Wayne Rooney. Now, I don't know. I wish I did, but I don't know much details at all about this new investor. It's been kept under wraps. these things are not simple and straightforward to complete. And I would rather Simon take his time and make sure that whoever the investor comes in to help him out is the right one. We do not want to repeat, say, past history of the New World regime in 2009, when everyone wanted somebody to take the club forward from Paul Stapleton and his fellow directors, and look where it happened, what happened from there, sort of thing. So I know there's, some skepticism maybe out there that this is going on. We have to take Simon Hallett at his word. He's done a fantastic job for this football club, notwithstanding the last two appointments, which people may quibble about. He's done a fantastic job for the football club. And I am sure he's doing his utmost to find the right person or people to come in, help him, and try and take the club to the next level. Now, I guess at the moment we need to be focusing about staying where we are rather than going to the next level. But I think hopefully something will get sorted. He sounded, from that meeting, quite hopeful, because he said so himself. I know I've said before that there's this, that, and the other. So I think he was conscious, even at that meeting, that by saying he was.
Sorry to interrupt, Chris. It always tended to coincide with a transfer window as well, when these sorts of news would break out. It just seemed very convenient.
Well, he made a note of it as well after Ian Foster was sacked. I'm sure there was an interview with Hallett that was actually suspiciously removed from Argyle TV a few months later when I went looking for it. But in it, I'm sure there's also a mention of it then.
I mean, you don't, as a journalist, I don't get to speak to Simon Hallett that often, but he is good at when I speak to him. Often when I speak to him, it's after something has happened of reasonable significance, i.e. the manager leaving, in Ian Foster's case. It's not often you just sort of speak to the chairman sort of for a whim, off a whim or things like that, if you see what I mean. And again, it was by chance I went down to St Dennis. I mean, I wasn't expecting. I really went because obviously at the time the talk was all about Wayne Rooney's future, wasn't it? And it was an opportunity to hear from the chairman what he thought about the managerial situation. That I thought was going to be the main story, and obviously he touched on that, and he gave his backing to Wayne Rooney then, and suggested they were going to look to help him. And Mike Phelan arrived a few days later, didn't he? But the investor was a bit of a bolt out of the blue. And yeah, I don't know how many people were at the St Dennis Working Men's Club that night, but it can't have been more than 80 or 90 maybe. And they were witness to a bit of a breaking news thing. So let's hope this investor gets over the line. Obviously, we're into the transfer window tomorrow, aren't we? And Simon Hallett at that meeting made it clear that money would be available. Now, how much money, I don't know. It won't be as much as we would all like, but it sounds as though there's going to be some financial spending power for the new head coach. And again, just on a brief tangent, isn't it? If you're going to change your head coach, do it today, not on January the 10th, and leave the new head coach with new players that he doesn't want, that he doesn't rate, and he can't bring in players that he does want to bring in. So again, it almost felt like, going back to your question about the change of the tone of the reporting and things like that, the transfer window is really crucial, isn't it? And dithering and being indecisive and getting into the middle of January and still being wasn't really an option, was it? I don't think.
Chris, it's 7:30. We said we wouldn't keep you beyond that. It has been our pleasure again to have you back on, and who knows in the future how famous the Working Men's Club in St Dennis will prove to be in the history of Plymouth Argyle. Chris, thank you very much. You are a wonderful champion for the football club and for the Green Army. We really do appreciate all the work you do.
Thank you, Chris.
Happy New Year to you and the family.
Happy New Year to you guys and everyone that's watching. And yeah, keep up the good work, guys. The more, sometimes football clubs don't like all the spotlight and attention from journalists and media and things like that. But I am a big believer, as I would be, that as much publicity as a football club can get and debate among the football fans so that they're passionate about their football club, that's important. So I think the work that you guys are doing, well done, keep going.
Thank you, Chris. Always a pleasure. Enjoy your New Year's celebrations, and
New
hopefully
Year,
you're
everyone.
reporting on a win tomorrow. We'll let Chris go back to his New Year's Eve evening. Nick, we got a brief little word out of you there. How are you? Are you how, just go straight into it. How do you feel about what's played out over the last sort of 48, 72 hours?
Weird one, because well, one thing, you'll probably have Chris back on in about 2 days with his emergency podcast with a new manager. The weird one, I slept terribly last night, and then I managed to get to sleep again around 5, and then woke up at 11 a.m. to 9 messages, all being like, he's gone, Rooney's gone, sacked, all that kind of stuff. Well, the first thing in the morning I want to see is a message from Sam. Obviously, that's highlight of my day. I see, scrolling through Twitter, endless pictures of Sam getting interviewed by ITV and everything. It had to happen, let's be fair. Coventry was one too many. Oxford is probably, if you're making a list of the most winnable away games and you're looking for where our first away win's going to come, I think a majority of people are putting Oxford, at the very least a plurality of people are putting Oxford top of that list. I had it top of my list. They weren't that great. We just were worse. It was my thought. And ultimately, our home form is enough to keep us up. Our away form is enough to have us the worst team in Championship history, really, and that's ultimately where he's lost it. And Rooney's got a crap away record over 4 clubs in a number of years, and it's just got worse. I mean, just had to, had to be. I'm glad it was done ahead of Bristol City. As Chris says, I think we're all aware that would have been a very, very toxic atmosphere had it gone wrong. And then I suppose on the flip side is had we won, that's just really putting off the inevitable. That would have been some turnaround for Rooney at that point, because he'd lost too many of the fans. It was a bit like Ian Foster. Once you've crossed that threshold and people for the first time have like flipped the switch in their head that, yes, I think it's time to change this manager, not many go back. And even if they do it only takes a small downturn before they have to go again. It's the thing that I watch for most keenly when I'm trying to work out if a manager is going to be sacked, particularly from a board's perspective, because no one wants to hear the chance of a sack of the board. And if they obstinately hold on to a manager who the people want rid of, then all of a sudden the focus of their eye turns from the manager they haven't sacked to the board who are responsible for not sacking them. So I'm glad the sacking happened at the right time, because, I mean, yeah, I'm sure Sam would agree. He lost the fans. The only difference was due to postponed games, not many. I mean, I tweeted earlier, but there haven't actually been that many home games recently. It's been the last 14 games, 9 away, 5 home. So I think part of the reason we haven't had booing at home park is because the performances have still been decent enough at home park, to not have such booing like Foster did, and also just haven't been that many. All the batterings have been away, but I think that would have changed against Bristol City. And I think it was the right move to end the relationship. Really, it's kind of sad because I think we all wanted it to work. Yeah, I don't really feel like Foster. I don't feel very happy about it. And I suppose now the question is, who else is going? Because we'll all have seen. I didn't watch the first half of this of the podcast. I assume you've mentioned Dewsnip already, but the rumours are right.
It was mentioned in passing that obviously there's the stories going around. I certainly didn't want to push it to Chris because obviously it's a sensitive subject. There's nothing official. It's all just conjecture on Twitter and Passotti and places like that. But
it wouldn't. As I'm sure Sam would agree, it wouldn't surprise me. For a lot of people, it seems kind of necessary. I fall into the camp where I think that it's probably the right decision. Ultimately, based on our understanding of how the club works internally, which obviously is an understanding, there's no document published online that explicitly states exactly what everyone is responsible for and so forth. But it's our understanding that the most crucial voice in the appointing of manager is Dewsnip, which would make sense. Simon Hallett, Andrew Parkinson, though they're involved in football, they're not footballing people. you would want to trust someone like that. So you expect that Dewsnip is the most important voice in that conversation. And ultimately, Foster was wrong. Took too long to fire him, as I'm sure he'd probably admit. Rooney was wrong. Maybe took it. Upside is hasn't necessarily taken too long to fire him because there's a lot of season to go. But still, this could have happened 3 or 4 weeks back. Pre-Sheffield United, we were having that discussion, weren't we? And then that mini surge at Sheffield United and Middlesbrough. Then all of a sudden, I mean, if we beat Middlesbrough, off the back of the Sheffield United performance and take a point from Coventry, we're looking very different. But the injuries and everything. But I think it's the only doubt I have in my mind about Dewsnip, and there's you can also the question of the transfer windows, the sudden change in strategy last year from back 4 to back 3, clearly giving Foster all the signings he wanted rather than sticking with the more data-led approach, being a bit too slow this summer. Like, think about how our season might have gone if we do get Beidou over the line, because we push a bit harder, we pay a little bit more. But then, like, so much of our season revolves around Sissoko not being available, and Saka's not ready yet. I think he's done better than some people give him credit for, but he's 18. He was never going to be Sissoko levels. Bundu's looked much better on the right because he doesn't have to cut back in on his right foot every time, which obviously prevents him from driving down the line. Basically, we haven't had it. If we have Beidou and we stick him there, I don't know how great he is on the left wing, but as an alternative, we might be talking about a very different situation here. So you can also look at transfer window. I think it's probably right if he goes. I think it's probably the right decision. No, I think it's definitely the right decision. The only doubt I have in my mind, I wonder if there are better directors of football available, and it might be a case that we get rid of Dewsnip, who is failing, but we don't get anyone better in. So I mean, that's probably how to balance that one up.
Sam, I just want to go off on a little tangent before we spiral it back to the conversation with you two about where we go from here. And the answer isn't to Home Park tomorrow to Bristol City, by the way. It's a bigger picture question. I just want to touch on Chris Errington, Sam, if I can, because we had him there, and a comment flashed up a minute ago about thanking him for asking the big questions after the Oxford game and things. And we were very strong in our praise for Chris about how he conducted himself and was the voice of the supporters, if you like, around the Ian Foster situation. He is a wonderful, wonderful ornament to the fan base, isn't he? In times like this, we really look up to Chris, and once again, he's delivered some wonderful articles over the last couple of days, hasn't he, conveying the views of the fan base?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the work he does is all the more impressive in the context of local newspapers being cut back, it all being sort of contracted out to, shall we say, journalism is the word, where it's all done in a central office and all very much worked out by algorithms and very generic reporting, often, done by people with no connection to the area. And it is really refreshing that in that increasing world we're living in with local journalism, there's somebody of the old guard who's still absolutely standing firm. I remember the days when there were only sort of 5 or 6 when there were as many as 5 or 6, I should say, people who were covering Plymouth sport for the Herald, and now it kind of seemingly it's just Chris. I think I have a couple of part-timers as well, but Chris being the primary one, and it's a superb job he's doing in the climate of local news being cut more and more. I think it's fair to say that when he does finally hang up his pen, which I hope will not be for a great many years yet, that the Plymouth Herald will find it very tough to replace him. And yeah, hopefully he'll be there. Hopefully he'll have some more good news to break for us over the coming days about a new manager.
Certainly will. Let's bring it back to Sam. Stay on mute because I'll come to you, then I'll come to Nick, and then Nick can have the first dibs at the question afterwards. What was Tom Kirk asked, what was the turning point for you with Rooney? He says it was Leeds. What was the turning point for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess it comes down to what you mean by turning point. Because if you're talking about what was the game in which I began to seriously doubt him, I think that was pretty much right from the start. As much as I got swept away in the wonderful optimistic pre-season, then we went to Sheffield, and I thought, you know what, we're really going to make this work, aren't we? And I think I really almost convinced myself about it. Then when we went to Sheffield Wednesday and lost 4-0, then that actually reminded me, oh yeah, we have actually just hired the guy who pretty much single-handedly took Birmingham down, haven't we? And that was a bit of a back down to earth moment. But I suppose then there was the upturn in form. There were 2 dreadful then back-to-back away games at Cardiff and Millwall, both of which we played shocking. There was Preston, which we were, as much as we were amazing for 10 minutes, we were very bad for the first 80. So I was beginning to doubt again then. Leeds wasn't so much of one for me, actually, I must say, just because I think that was very clearly a game plan whereby we were just putting all men behind the ball and doing something very different to what we normally would do. And I can kind of get what Tom means. That's why people might lose faith in him for that, because he was demanding his principles. But that wasn't the real clincher for me. I think it was those two back-to-backs at Norwich and Bristol City in the week that sort of really led me to think, right, this just isn't happening, is it? Let's just make the change. I think it was those two, Norwich and Bristol City. Then, Paul Burke on our screen has said the exact same turning point was Norwich and Bristol City. So, great minds think alike, clearly. Then when it became clear we were bringing in Mike Phelan, I thought, you know what, whilst I would have got rid of Rooney at this point, I suppose it could be argued that bringing in Phelan is almost akin to bringing in a new manager. So after that, I thought, let's give him time. Swansea was a bit of a better performance. Sheffield United was an even better performance. And Middlesbrough was an even better performance again. So after that gradual improvement, I actually thought, you know what, maybe Phelan, let's be honest, maybe he's just being the manager on the quiet and Wayne's just being the face for the public. But at that point, I was optimistic-ish. I still predicted, if you remember when we did the Not Live podcast in the Stoke, not the Stoke Bar and Grill, the Plymouth Cricket Club. I still said, to give credit to myself, I don't think we'll go down if we play as we have the last two. But when Joe went round at the end and asked, do you think we will go down? I still said, yes, we would, because ultimately I was very nervous that we'd seen too many false dawns already. And we then went to Coventry and Boxing Day and put in one of the most shocking performances of an absolutely shocking season. And then I was right back on the Rooney out trade at that point. I feel it probably should have happened after Bristol City. I get why they took a gamble on Phelan, but even then, having done so, he still should have been sacked after Coventry. So I think we've maybe gone maybe 5 games too late, maybe 1 game too late, depending on how you look at it, I would say. But I think Leeds was a bit of a unique one. That wasn't really much of a turning point for me, I have to say.
Nick, what was the moment you started to? I'm not going to say started to doubt it, because I think we all had doubts from the moment that message came out all those months ago. What was the moment you really started to realise that a change was necessary?
Sam, do you remember when the rumours first came out about Rooney and I was just messaging you with, I was incredulous. I was like, well, obviously this is a nonsense rumour. Why on earth would we do that? And then
me and Aaron interviewed Danny Merther, the My Argyle Live podcast, which you can find on all podcast platforms, by the way. Very nice bloke, Danny Merther. And me and Aaron literally said to him, we're going to apologise if we're a little bit stunned and shocked, because we've just seen this tweet from a very, very reputable journalist saying that Wayne Rooney is our new manager. And I think Danny Mayer looked as shocked as we felt. He was like, really? So without wanting to grass up Danny Mayer, I think he was also a little bit surprised by the decision-making process that we had. So, we were all incredulous, weren't we? And like, as much as we did try and...
You tried to sell it to me a little bit. I forget why. Maybe I missed it. Someone tried to sell it to me a little bit. I just wasn't having it for the first week. I remember, when I got, because I was on holiday, I feel bad for my wife. Who just had to listen.
You did some good research, didn't you, Nick?
Yeah, I did. Thank you.
It's now lost. Now your Substack's gone. It's now lost forever.
No, I still got them. I can always put it back up.
Okay.
But anyhow, I got back. My wife listened to me moan about it for 2 days of our holiday. Because I was so angry. My exact reaction was, the only reason we can be doing this is if we got a Netflix deal that's going to fund a January spending spree, which is a half right. Anyhow, I got back, did a bunch of research, and I was like, I can see how it could work, and I can see the data they might be referring to. Still pretty skeptical. And then Sheffield Wednesday, I was pretty much gone immediately. And then I don't know, I was won back over by that spell from Sunderland to Blackburn. Things started to click into gear. Ultimately, I was kind of gone after Bristol City. I was on the podcast after that, I think, and I pretty much said, why not give them Sheffield United? It's basically a free hit. We're going to lose anyway. And then obviously that best performance justifies retaining another week. I was pretty much the exact same as Sam, really. I think it probably should have been after Bristol City. I can see the rationale for. I can understand what the board were probably thinking as well, which is you've got to always remember the injuries he is dealing with. Again, like Sissoko is fit for all this. Being that we have like so much depth on the wings, if we just had Sissoko as the main creator, that might have been a very different story. And then the board might well have in mind that January, with signings lined up, with obviously that brief resurgence, kind of Swansea, but predominantly Sheffield United, Middlesbrough, with players coming back from injury and the transfers coming in, it's just a case of we just need to support them and get over the line until we can have the little break around the FA Cup. And then we've got 3 home games in a row, haven't we? Like QPR home, Oxford home, and Burnley home. Win 2 of those, all of a sudden the atmosphere is a little bit better. That's what I'd gamble they were counting on. That's probably what I'd gamble they were counting on. I kind of get it. But for me, Bristol City, I think had to be 10 goals in 5 days. Just not good enough. Off the back of the awful home run, away run.
We have over 3,300 people watching live, which is really quite staggering. That there's more people sat here on New Year's Eve watching us rabbit on about a manager who's no longer employed than there was in the away end at Cardiff on the back of that good run. That's what we're at the moment. But we are really, really grateful, and we promise you we're not going to take up too much more of your New Year's Eve evening, because 2025 is going to be better for Plymouth Argyle than 2024 was. That's what I predict.
I hope so.
Yeah, I mean, it can't get much worse. Nick, Chris Errington alluded to it, that he's had to do the mathematics today. It's now the 5th time that Kevin Nanscoville has taken caretaker charge. At what point, how many more times does he have to sit in an interview before or after tomorrow's game or whatever game it will be and say that he doesn't want the job anymore and he'd rather it just go plain sailing for the next few years? Because every time we've asked, he's always been there for us, and more often than not, it doesn't tend to be too bad a spell as caretaker either.
Well, yes and no, I suppose, because the first one obviously was that Port Vale 4-0 hammering, and then obviously we beat Scunthorpe, went down anyway. Not that hardly going to pin that one on him. He won the game. Hopefully not much more, because we all were kind of hoping that Foster was going to be the repeat of Shuey, whereby he stays for 2, 3, 4 years and takes us forward. Really, the question you're asking there is how much do we trust the board to hire the next manager successfully? Or it could be an interim to the end of the season, then someone after that, though I doubt that. And I know that Hallett in particular, obviously, he appreciates what he sees as constructive criticism. You know, he hasn't got anything wrong with people criticizing, so long as it's based in it's not laden with swear words and it's based in some form of evidence and data and so forth. Ultimately, the data points are 2 disastrous hires, both gone in within 6 months or so. I don't feel majorly confident right now. Part of the reason I'm pro bringing Shuey back is because we know what we're getting with that. There's less of a gamble, you know. And Chris was saying about going for a more. Go on.
Sorry to jump in very quickly. Is that not a perfect example of why data shouldn't be taken so literally? Because the first 2 appointments Simon Hallett made, Ryan Lowe and Stephen Schumacher, were perceivably not off data. The last 2, he tries to say that Wayne Rooney was done on data. I'm still waiting for that email with some attachments to show what data it was they appointed him off. But Ian Foster and things was more a data-driven approach. Like, is this not why we should just pick the right manager that everyone can see as the right manager?
Well, I'll try not to go into a massive diatribe about how data can be misleading, but it can, as we all well know, right? I'll give you the example I'm most likely to give, right? Someone might post after a game, ex-defender made 7 tackles in that game, brilliant defender, lots of tackles. That's just what happened. They made 7 tackles. There's no justification around, was it because they were caught out of position? Was someone else having a terrible game? 7 tackles is a what, not a why. And in football, there aren't actually very many metrics you can in my opinion, there are not very many metrics you can reliably use as a KPI. Points, win percentage, and XG are probably the only ones that really work. All the rest of it needs so much analysis to properly understand what you're looking at. It's possible that Argyle just aren't as good at analysing data as they think. We can't see the internal workings of it. They might have found some data they felt very confident on, but ultimately it was just a big pile of what without much of a why behind it, and thus they misinterpreted it. I think there might be a lot of that going on in the football industry. Wouldn't surprise me. And yeah, you're right. I doubt that Lowe and Shuey had too much data behind them. Ryan Lowe, the only data they probably cared about, Ryan Lowe, progressive, attractive football, which we wanted to fit in with a strategy to build the fan base, and promotion winner. Yeah. We can't see what's going on behind the scenes. We've no idea what data was there. More importantly, what data was vetted? Was this data that Rooney presented? Did they dig into? How much? I'm really intrigued to know more about exactly how that happened, particularly after the Foster hire. Hallett said in one of the interviews that they're going to change the way they recruit for the next manager. Presumably they did. But how did it change? What are they going to learn for this time? But yeah, I'm really keen to know whether did Rooney present that data and they took it on face value? They part fact checked it. That's always sort of buzzed around in my head, that exactly how they do it. I saw someone else tweet earlier as well about wanting to headhunt more, and I agree. I don't really understand why we're going through the route of receiving applications so much. I am surprised we don't have a permanent standing list of 3 to 5 priority candidates that are ready to approach at any one time. Maybe I'm naive in that sense, but it does surprise me a bit.
I'll tell you one person who would also like to see the data that was presented that suggests Wayne Rooney's the new manager is a man who's probably got a great big smile on his face, and that's Simon Jordan at the moment, after the demise of Wayne Rooney. So let's round off the conversation then as we head towards the 2-hour mark, which is sort of what we said we'd do tonight. And that is, where do we go now? What sort of route are we taking? Who is the new man? Sam, you put in very strong cases back in January for Michael Skubala. Are you still very much in the Skubala camp, or we know obviously you're keen on Schumacher? There's obviously people like Tony Mowbray being thrown around. We don't know about his health. Neil Harris. Where are we going to end up? Ryan Lowe. Let's throw his name in as well.
Okay, I'll kind of briefly give you my 20-second ago thoughts on all of those. Schumacher, absolutely my number one candidate. It's destined, it's a redemption story, and he's just a very good manager. Football's all about stories and about emotion and about passion. Steven Schumacher, the returning prodigal son, to finish what he started and to take the club back up the league. That is the story we all want and we all need. It is absolutely
that's just had a marker clipped up for TikTok.
It's absolutely my first choice. Ryan Lowe, I don't think. I think certain bits about the way he left and the acrimony there would not be good. And I think with him, it's probably less easy to repair than perhaps with Schumacher. He didn't have so many good times to fall back on, and I think he doesn't have, shall we say, a personal connection. And certainly, I don't think his family would perhaps want him to be in Plymouth. He was living away, wasn't he? Unlike Steven Schumacher. So I don't think Ryan Lowe would really be on the cards. He is a capable manager at this level, but I don't think he'd be interested in coming to us, and I think nor would we be particularly interested in talking to him. So I'll say no to Ryan Lowe. Skubala, yeah, look, I was really keen on Skubala when we appointed Foster. I was keen on I think actually it was when we appointed Rooney that I was keen on Skubala. Actually, I think he hadn't really got started by that time, but he's done a good job at Lincoln. They've dropped off a little bit in recent weeks, haven't they? But they're still, in touching distance of the League One playoffs. I think he's having a bit of a tricky second season, if you like. So I think he's maybe gone a little bit down the list. He's not doing quite so well as what he did last year, but I certainly would be very open to Skubala if he was an option. Tony Mowbray, we all know he's recovered from cancer recently. He did say that he's willing to go back to work in the new year. He's feeling ready. He's feeling good. He would be a good manager. He's got a good record at developing young players. He's got a good record at getting sort of underperforming teams to punch above their weight to some extent with Sunderland. Certainly he left them around.
Look at his turnaround with Birmingham after he picked up from Rooney there.
Yeah.
He set the template
very well at Birmingham, and if not for his sad health issues, he would have kept them up for sure. So I think Tony Mowbray would be a good pick. I think obviously, like I say, Schumacher's my number one, but Tony Mowbray would be a good pick. Neil Harris, I'm not so sure on. I'm not dogmatically wedded to to playing a certain way. I mean, I kind of am, but I would tolerate it to keep us up. But I'm not sure our squad is of the right makeup for a Neil Harris style of play. He likes a very bulky, physical squad, quite direct, and the data, the recruitment has all been geared towards players of a certain profile for a possession-based or certainly attacking-based team. I don't think Neil Harris would be a good cultural fit with Plymouth Argyle Football Club.
I'll point you back as well to Foster in January and the signings we made. And like Soranolo was signed to play right wing back, and we pivoted to then play with fullbacks, and he's not been able to break into the team. And I Forshaw, in theory, obviously hasn't worked out as we'd have hoped. But like, if you bring in Neil Harris for a short-term change, then you're also going to be spending a lot of money on a profile of player who either aren't going to be needed within 6 months, and thus are going to be remaining on the wage bill and hard to shift. But then also, like, you've got the risk of losing it. Like, I'm a big believer that part of the reason that attendance at home park have increased, one of the reasons is the quality of football. And we saw last season we can still draw in a lot of fans, even while the performances are crap anyway. But we don't want to go down the route of starting to lose fans, I don't think. I think we're in a better position to go back up than people realise if we go down. I think we're in a far better position to go back up if we go down. I've got half an eye on making sure that whoever we hire can bring us back up as well.
Yeah, I would go with that. And again, that is once again yet another great case for Stephen Schumacher, because he's someone who has got expertise in both, right? He's got expertise in keeping a team up when they're in the bottom three deep into the season. That's what he did in Stoke last year. And he's got expertise in getting a team out of League One. Of course, what he did with us, getting 101 points with an upper mid-table budget, is probably never going to be repeated, quite genuinely. And in theory, with an even bigger budget, there's no reason why he can't get us promoted automatically again if we were to go down. So I think we're probably all agreed, certainly us three, go full tilt for Schumacher if we can. And then if not, if he's just not interested, or if he's going to West Brom or anywhere else, then in that scenario, look at other options. A couple of comments saying Tony Mowbray's totally unrealistic. I'm not sure he is, because he took over Blackburn when they were in League One. I think he took over Sunderland when they were only just promoted. Now, yes, they've had a lot more money to offer, and it's more his part of the world. I get that, but he's not. Is it people are suggesting it's unrealistic because of the location of Plymouth and his recent ill health? Is that? But then the ill health, I think, is something that he said that he's now ready. He said in the new year he'll start applying for jobs again. Now, the location, I grant you, but I also think he strikes me as a very down-to-earth, sort of salt-of-the-earth guy who likes a challenge. And a challenge is absolutely what Plymouth Argyle would present to him. And I think if we can give him the mindset of we're doing it the right way, where we're gonna help him with the players he wants, with the new investment coming in, and we're going to give him a chance. Ultimately, he took over Blackburn in League One and got them up. So maybe he can take over a Plymouth Argyle side with the aim of keeping us up. And if not, he can have a good chance of getting us out of League One. Definitely, I agree Schumacher's the best fit, but I'm not sure Tony Mowbray is such a completely unrealistic prospect that we should rule him out entirely. That's just my view.
I absolutely adore Tony Mowbray in footballing sense. I think he's an absolute legend of a bloke who, and I think if you listen to a number of people, you don't just get a small handful, but if you listen to loads of wide-ranging views in the game, there's very few people have negative things to say about him. I'm very fortunate to have some people in my life who are Sunderland fans, and they absolutely adored him up there. And they were really, really disappointed he was thrown out of that particular club. Nick, Sam sort of put words in your mouth that you're in the Schumacher in camp. Are there any? If you are very much in the Schumacher in camp, that's great. Are there any other names that you'd like to throw in? Johnny Heitinger's been linked with West Brom. If he's good enough for West Brom, he's good enough for Argyle, isn't he?
I still remember when Sam was a big fan of Colo Torre to Wigan. I'm never going to stop bringing that one up. I never really bothered to throw around names for managerial appointments because so often they're just ones you'd never expect. It'd be like Ian Foster, for example, Christ Wayne Rooney. I never thought that was one that definitely was never an expected one. I just go all out for Schumacher is my bit. Assuming he's interested, which I'm sure by now they must have had the conversation. I don't know if the him being in Bulgaria bit is true or not, but it's a phone call to have a conversation. I'm sure they've had the conversation. He's got to be the first choice. He ticks literally every box you could think of. Just write off 2024. Never happened. Just like that small aberration of 12 months and then straight back. Just that's probably my go-to. Otherwise, Mowbray is very high on my list if it is realistic. But otherwise, I suppose I'm a bit more long-term thinking. I can stomach relegation, particularly the position that the new manager's going to inherit, side bottom of the table. That's not an easy turnaround. Quite possibly bottom of the table by 6-7 points by the time they take over. I'm realistic that this might be a case of the manager has to suffer through relegation and then try to take us back up. I want someone who's going to play the right style of football. That could be a bit more pragmatic, but I don't want Neil Harris and we're going to sign a championship level Ryan Taylor. Not that I didn't love Ryan Taylor, but I don't want to start going long ball and everything. I don't want to compromise all those beliefs, and I want to trust that they can take us back up. If there's one thing that really worried me about Ian Foster last season was that we were willing to go down with him, but I had no faith that he was going to be able to lead us to promotion if we did. So yeah, those are the main things I think I'm looking for. Right style of football doesn't necessarily have to be someone young, hence Mowbray, and someone I can trust if we do go down is going to leave us, put us in a good position to go straight back up again.
This was one of the points I made on one of the radio interviews earlier, that if we were to appoint somebody on more of a longer term basis on an 18-month 36-month contract, or 30-month contract, shall I say, that you could give them 4 or 5 months, that's the rest of the season, just to evaluate what it is, and give them a proviso that we are competing at the top end next year. Or if we're still in the championship, if they keep us up, great, you've got a foundation to build on. It'll be interesting to see how the club play it, and it will be very interesting. I'd say there'll be a fair few eyes fixated on the Mayflower stand tomorrow when those two teams emerge from the tunnel, just to see if anybody in particular is in attendance.
Do you think there's going to be a tweet later monitoring a flight from Sofia or something? Okay, well, who was the French manager there was a link with, and there was people monitoring a flight?
Jocelyn Gervenek, wasn't it? Was that his name?
Yeah.
I think we got to blame Voodoo for that.
Was that when we hired Ryan Lowe?
Yeah, it might have been. Actually, yeah.
I thought it was when we hired Derek Adams. I could be wrong.
No, it definitely wasn't then. Must have been Lowe.
There definitely was a French bloke linked when we hired Derek Adams. Maybe there's 2 separate ones.
Okay, but I don't remember anyone monitoring flights from wherever it was.
No, fair point.
We'll blame Voodoo for the Jocelyn Gervenek links, and I'm sure when Sky Bet release their market in the morning, I'm sure he'll feature in it. Nick, very quickly, just before we go, we've had score prediction. Oh, and Sam, actually, because you weren't on Sunday night. What's your score predictions for tomorrow? Obviously, it's probably changed a fair bit now. Certainly, I wish I could go back in time and give a different score prediction. What's your thoughts for tomorrow's game?
I'm probably gonna say loss, but I think that's more. I think the too many injuries, basically. Like a Whittaker and Hardy fit. Someone like Mumba was Mumba had a rest all season. Yeah, there are a few players who barely had a break. I think fitness levels are going to be the main thing that dictates. I really hope there's a sudden surge and improved performance just off the back of everything. And we haven't been bad at home park either. We've been pretty good. We're still I think we're lower mid-table for it, having played fewer games. So I can see us winning. But I just think given who's available and the limitations of the squad currently, I just think Mr. Bristol City are going to have a professional performance and get a 2-1 win.
Bristol City are draw specialists. They do love a draw. And I think with our upturn in form, we haven't started yet, but upturn in positivity, upturn in vibes, with Kevin Nanskyville leading and Joe Edwards in the dugout at the helm. I think the players, whatever you think of this set of players, I think they're actually going to run through brick walls for those two. But equally, as with Nick, I don't think we've quite got enough quality, certainly in terms of fit players on the pitch to get a win. But I think we've got enough that we can keep them to a draw. I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw.
2-2 draw. There you go. If you missed my score prediction, which I wish I had a second chance at, you can catch it on Sunday's pod. And if you haven't seen Sunday's pod yet, I really do recommend you go and watch it. It's all well and good in hindsight, but it really was a good discussion between John, Graham, and Adam. It was. That's it. 2 hours, 5 minutes. I don't think we could go any further on what hasn't already been said, because as you can probably imagine, there's every probability we'll be back at some point again this week with another emergency podcast. As Aaron is showing on screen there, if you are going down to Home Park tomorrow, just do give a little bit extra time on your travel. There are weather warnings in place, so do bear that in mind and do be safe when traveling to and from the stadium. And if you are going to Home Park, for Christ's sake, get in there tomorrow and get right behind them. They're going to need every shout that we can give tomorrow. And I've sensed Bristol City are going to walk into a wall of noise when Semper Fidelis pipes up at around about 12:27. Good evening, Joshua. You didn't ring me in work today. Gents, thanks for joining me on the better half of tonight's episode. To Aaron, to Dan, to Graham, to James, to Chris Errington, to Nick, to Sam, thank you very much for joining us. 3,500 people. You can all go and enjoy your New Year's celebrations now. We've kept you long enough. Massive thank you for joining us. I'm not going to go into a massive spiel about how much your support's been great, because I said it all on Sunday night, and we really do mean it. Every ounce of support, every comment, every question that you send in means the world to us. So thank you very much. We will see you again, would you believe it, in 48 hours' time after the Bristol City game, regardless of if we appoint a manager tonight or tomorrow morning. We will be back on day of the week, is it Thursday night, 8 o'clock, same time, same place. Join us then as we review Bristol City. And then, you know, if they decide to appoint somebody on Thursday night just to spite us, whether or not we're back on Friday, we'll see if we've got any energy left in the tank. Thank you very much for joining us. Happy New Year to you and all your families. Thank you once again for the support. Enjoy the game tomorrow. See you on Thursday.